2 years old. I've been married to Jacob, my age mate and boyfriend since my student days, for 4 years now. Our story dates back to when I was 19, attending a preparatory school for medical students. Back then, I was a year out of high school, aiming to get into the nursing program at the State University's medical school. Jacob, too, was aiming for medical school, having moved from the countryside to the city. We were both immersed in our studies every day. One day, I accidentally left my binder in the study room and headed to the station without realizing it. That's when a man holding my binder and calling my name ran after me. It was Jacob. This encounter led us to start greeting and talking whenever we met at school. The following year, we both got into our desired universities, and Jacob and I officially started dating. Jacob had been living with his mother since his father left them for another woman when he was in middle school. Even though he had become a medical student, paying for tuition and living expenses was tough. He said, "I went to a private high school and took a gap year, so I don't want to burden my mom anymore." So Jacob spent most of his free time working part-time jobs, like tutoring, teaching at a cram school, and working in cafes and grocery stores. Naturally, our dates were brief chats on a park bench between his part-time shifts, or sharing homemade lunches during university class breaks. But I deeply respected Jacob's dedication and felt genuinely happy to support him closely. As we both became seniors, I started preparing for graduate school while completing my hospital internships. I aspired to be a specialist nurse, requiring not only a nursing license from the university, but also a master's degree from a graduate nursing program. Meanwhile, Jacob, facing his clinical internships in the 5th year, began to express his anxieties to me, mainly about finances. He knew he couldn't work part-time as he had been once his clinical started, despite having saved up since his 1st year. But his plans were derailed when his mother fell ill and had to quit her job. Suddenly, Jacob faced the dilemma of supporting his mother's living expenses, and with no other option, decided to move in and live with her. However, living in a cheap 70-square-foot apartment with his mother wasn't feasible for Jacob. Even settling in an old apartment far from the station, with secondhand appliances and furniture from friends, required a substantial amount of money. Mom says she'll look for a job here, but there's a limit to what she can find without any real qualifications or career history. Jacob's face grew darker and more fatigued every time we met. Seeing Jacob like this, I made a decision. After graduating, I married Jacob in a simple ceremony with just photos and started working as a nurse, giving up my plans for grad school. My family, friends, and professors were all surprised by this decision. They tried to persuade me not to give up on grad school, but I was determined. Luckily, my grades are good enough to get hired at the university hospital, and then we can get Victoria, Jacob's mom, on my health insurance as a dependent. But still, this way Victoria doesn't have to work while she's unwell, and Jacob can focus on his studies, right? So we started our married life, but the initial phase was more challenging than I had anticipated. Firstly, my salary as a new full-time nurse had to support 3 adults. Then there was Victoria, not adept at household chores. Despite claiming she'd handle them so I could work overtime and night shifts, her efforts were lacking. She just crammed laundry into the washer without sorting, skipping line drying and going straight to the dryer. For meals, she'd microwave pre-cooked dishes from the supermarket bought just before closing. Even our soups were just instant freeze-dried ones. Yet she didn't skimp on spending for snacks to accompany her and Jacob's regular evening drinks. And it was always just the two of them enjoying these moments, whether or not I was on a night shift. When I expressed any dissatisfaction, Victoria would quickly become sullen. "Just because you're earning a bit, you think you don't have to respect your mother-in-law and husband? Scary wife. I might have said I'd do the chores, but that was just polite. Isn't it natural for you, as the wife and daughter-in-law, to happily take on all the household duties?" But what hurt me most wasn't Victoria's behavior. It was Jacob's complete lack of response to it. Even when he was present for her sarcastic comments, he would either give an embarrassed smile or pretend not to hear and ignore it. If I dared to question him, Jacob would snap back. "What do you expect me to do? I can't scold Victoria." And then Victoria, overhearing, would get even angrier. It always ended with me apologizing. This went on for 2 years until Jacob finally graduated. But then a new problem arose. Jacob wanted to do his 2-year clinical training at the university-affiliated hospital, but insisted I change my job, because working at the same place would be inconvenient. Why can't we work at the same hospital? People will feel awkward around a married couple in the same workplace. Ella, you're just a nurse. It doesn't matter where you work, right? Exactly, you're only a nurse. As long as you earn money, any place is fine. Victoria and Jacob pressured me like this, but the university hospital had a program to support my dream of becoming a specialist nurse. I had been enduring the hardships, hoping to use this opportunity to fulfill my long-held dream. Moreover, to Victoria's surprise, the salary for a resident doctor at a university hospital is much lower than at private hospitals. Victoria, who had assumed she'd live a lavish life once her son became a doctor, was shocked by the salary Jacob would earn. Furthermore, Jacob starting work meant the beginning of student loan repayments. With an already modest salary, repaying a fixed amount every month would be a serious drain. That's why Victoria and Jacob wanted me to switch to a hospital with more night shifts, which paid better. Eventually, I couldn't stand up to their combined pressure and changed my job. However, as Jacob's residency began, he was praised as a promising young doctor, and started looking down on me. At first, I tried to be understanding. Maybe it's true that I owe my graduation to you, but you have no idea how miserable Victoria and I felt, always having to tiptoe around you, he said once. I thought he was just carried away with finally becoming a doctor, and that he would return to his old self eventually. But during this time, Jacob was using his family credit card in my name. He went to a party hosted by a young doctor he'd befriended at work, and spent a whopping $1,000 in one night. Even if Jacob wanted to impress his friends, spending that much at a party was excessive. I complained, but he sneered. I'm a promising elite doctor. Ella's just a nurse. Even a fool like Ella can see who's more important. If you don't want to be dumped, just shut up and serve me. Then he started flirting on the phone with a college girl he met at the party, right in front of me. Stunned, I was further mocked by Victoria, who had come over. Just as you see, Jacob is popular. You, an uneducated older woman, should just keep quiet. Since then, Jacob acted as he pleased without restraint, and Victoria didn't stop him but rather encouraged his behavior. As I cleaned up their messy room after a tiring night shift, I questioned whether I belonged in this house, or if there was any point in continuing this marriage. True to the saying that bad premonitions come true, Jacob, after completing his training, moved to a prestigious private hospital under a renowned doctor. The hospital was far from our current apartment, so we had to move. To my surprise, Victoria also wanted to live alone. I hoped this might bring back the old Jacob in our now private life. But the apartment Jacob showed me on a real estate website was a stylish studio apartment, clearly not suitable for a couple. As I looked puzzled, he said, "So, what about you?" "I'll be living alone in the new apartment. Victoria plans to rent out a room on a different floor of the same apartment." "Living alone? What about me?" "What are you talking about?" "We're breaking up, of course. You're no longer needed. You should be thankful that I've been with a woman like you, with below average looks and just a mere nurse. I should even ask for a severance payment." Then he laughed, laughing with Victoria for dinner, leaving me in shock. But it seemed I still had a shred of pride. Wiping away tears, I quickly packed only what mattered and asked my closest friend since college, Nora, to keep my things for a while via WhatsApp. "Don't be formal, just stay at my place," she offered. "But Nora, you live with your family. I'm already imposing with just my stuff." "Don't worry, Dad's on a business trip. My brother recently moved out, so there's a free room. It's just Mom, me, and my little brother, so no need to feel awkward." Nora insisted we should act quickly, and had her brother drive to pick me up from the apartment. Thus, I ended up staying at Nora's family home, gratefully accepting their kindness. While I was settling in with Nora, Jacob and Victoria moved as they had said. and sent me divorce papers at my workplace. Along with it was a note written by Jacob. To my soon-to-be ex-wife leading a miserable life with a divorce history, here's some severance money for you, with $800 in crisp bills. But I returned the $800 along with the signed divorce papers to Jacob. And so my first marriage ended. 5 years passed and I remarried Daniel, Nora's brother. The memories of Jacob and Victoria faded from my daily life. Then one day while I was at a hospital with Daniel, I heard a familiar voice. "Ella? Is that you, Ella?" It was Jacob, whom I never wanted to see again. Beside him stood a younger woman, dressed in high-end brands. When I remained silent, Jacob looked me up and down and sneered. "Lost for words at seeing your ex-husband after so long? Well, I guess so. An old, poor-looking woman like you must be too embarrassed to be seen." It seemed the past 5 years had not brought wisdom to Jacob, only more absurdity. As I ignored him, Jacob, thinking I was just being stubborn, pestered me. "Can't even say hello after I went out of my way to talk to you." Daniel, who had been on the phone nearby, approached us. "Ella, is something wrong?" "No, nothing. Is it okay that you ended your call?" "Yeah, it's fine." While we talked, Jacob, watching us, spoke again. "Is that guy your current husband?" "Yes, he is. Why?" "Wow, I'm amazed. A miserable woman dumped by me found someone to marry her. It's a miracle." Daniel, realizing who Jacob was, laughed. "Indeed, I'm blessed with a miracle to have a caring and capable woman like Ella as my wife." "Lucky? Haha. Are you Ella's kept man? That explains why you're satisfied with someone like her. Probably don't even work, just tagging along to the hospital on a weekday." Jacob dismissed us with a flick of his hand. It was one thing for him to look down on me, but to do the same to Daniel? As I was about to speak up, Daniel stepped between Jacob and me, facing Jacob directly. "Could you please close your mouth if it's not too much to ask for someone as uncivilized as you?" "What? How dare you talk to me like that?" "Sorry, I thought I needed to be extra direct with someone as unreasonable as you." "Do you even know who I am? I'm the deputy director of this hospital. I'm not someone who has time for nobodies like you," Jacob boasted arrogantly. Daniel, pausing to smile, replied, "Oh, I'm well aware of who you are and what kind of person you are. And do you have any idea who I might be? Surely you don't think I'm just a nobody's kept man, do you?" Caught off guard by Daniel's retort, Jacob looked stunned for a moment, but then quickly snarled, "Like I would know anything about a nobody like you." As Jacob signaled to the woman beside him to leave, she stood frozen. "Come on, let's go. What are you doing?" Jacob impatiently pulled at her arm, but the woman, pale-faced, turned to Daniel and said in a low voice, "What are you doing? Do you even know who this man is?" "What are you talking about, Scarlett? You know this guy?" "Of course, didn't I tell you? The group of nurses and doctors who quit en masse recently are suing us for unfair and poor working conditions." "So what? We can just get a good lawyer and settle it, right?" "I thought so too, but it won't be that simple now that he's involved." In response to Scarlett, Daniel smiled and handed out his business card to Jacob, who still looked displeased. It clearly indicated that Daniel was the head of a law firm. "A lawyer? You?" "Yes. I'm here today to meet with Henry, the hospital director, regarding a class action lawsuit being considered by the nurses and doctors." "A class action lawsuit? That's just a ploy to extort money, isn't it?" "So that's the hospital stance, huh? Well, if there's such a misunderstanding, I guess we'll have to meet in court." Scarlett's face turned even bluer at Daniel's words. Suddenly, she bowed deeply and asked us to move to a reception room. Reluctantly, to avoid causing more disturbance, we followed her. Once inside, Henry, who had been contacted by Scarlett, arrived and immediately apologized to Daniel. Both pleaded for us to consider a settlement and to persuade our clients to reconsider the lawsuit. Seeing their desperation, Scarlett shouted at Jacob, "Come here and apologize too." "But why should I apologize to some lawyer?" "You still don't get it? He's a renowned lawyer specializing in labor issues, especially in the medical field. There are hospitals that have gone under due to media scrutiny and financial strain after antagonizing him. That guy, a top lawyer. Ella's husband. Ella now works as an assistant in my law firm, using her nursing experience to provide insight into the realities and sentiments of medical professionals. She accompanied me today for that purpose. As Daniel spoke amiably, Jacob finally seemed to grasp the situation, and throwing himself beside us, began to apologize to us. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea." Jacob stammered, struggling to find the right words. Daniel pressed on. "You didn't know? So, this apology is just because you were forced to after finding out." "No, it's not like that. Firstly, you're apologizing to the wrong people. You should be apologizing to the client who worked under unfair conditions, and to Ella, whom you used and discarded when she was no longer needed." Miss Ella, I'm deeply sorry. After all the care you and Victoria provided, I treated you terribly. I sincerely apologize and will make financial amends. Please, forgive me. And could you ask your husband to persuade the clients to settle?" Jacob bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. Despite my urge to laugh at his pathetic change in demeanor, I managed to stay composed. "Ella, what do you want to do?" Daniel asked calmly. "More than forgiving or not, I just don't want any involvement. I can't even bear to have him in my sight." Daniel stood before Jacob, still cheerful, and said, "As a loving husband, I wish to abide by my wife's wishes. So, your apologies are unnecessary and meaningless." "But what about the lawsuit? Business is business, and personal feelings don't enter into it. But, being human, I might just put a little extra effort into winning this case." Jacob, Scarlett, and Henry all looked utterly defeated. The lawsuit ended in a complete victory for Daniel's clients, receiving nearly the full amount of their claims. The hospital suffered from the financial burden and negative media coverage, leading to a drastic drop in patients. Many doctors and nurses resigned, and the hospital went bankrupt in less than 2 years. Meanwhile, Jacob was blamed for the bankruptcy, divorced by Scarlett, and struggled to find work in the tight-knit medical community. Despite his financial woes, he had to sell the apartment he and Victoria lived in, leaving her to fend for herself. Now, Victoria and Jacob live modestly, supported by her part-time cleaning job and his earnings as a tutor. As for me, I'm blessed with a child with Daniel and juggle a busy life of parenting and work. I hope to continue nurturing our happy family of 3.